And welcome to another episode of Expert Speak. I'm Michael DeLon. Today I'm talking with Jason Epstein. Jason, thanks for being with me today, sir.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Hey, Jason is a personal injury attorney out in the Pacific Northwest, and he runs in some circles of people that I know, and that's how we cross paths. And I thought it would be good, just Jason, to take a little bit of time and talk about. Well, I mean, your background and your passion and why you became an attorney. I want to hear that story, but also helping our audience really understand some of the precautions that we need to be taking, some of the things that are distracting us, and really what not just what to do if we're involved in an accident, but how are we going to choose a great attorney to represent us. So that's kind of where we're going to go with this conversation. But as we dive into that deep end, Jason, tell me, I mean, how did you get doing what you're doing today?
Yeah, I think so. I'm 51 years old. I don't know
Okay.
how old you are, Michael. Are we roughly in
I turned 59 in July, so yeah, we're
okay.
close.
Growing up in the 80s, um, we're on Zoom, so you're not sitting across from me. But I'm 5'7" on a good day,
Okay.
and with the last name Epstein, which is clearly I might as well just have Jew stamped on me. And so um, I think that's all by way of saying that I grew up with kind of a chip on my shoulder from getting picked on all the time. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
whether it was because of my height or whether it was because being in a religious minority, even in Seattle, which has a fair amount of Jewish population, still you're probably less than 1% of the population, and kids say stupid stuff all the time. And so I just had like ingrained in me from a really early age just this sense of kind of fairness and
Mm-hmm.
wanting to make sure that everything was fair for everyone and there was a level playing field. And um, and I think that was just it's just something innate in me, probably because of the combination of things that I mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I was just kind of naturally drawn towards this particular field as far as a place where lawyers can actually make a real difference for people who, without our help, are frankly just going to get screwed by the insurance companies because it's in their financial best interest to give people as little as possible.
Yeah.
Um, and so, it's hard for me. It's always hard for me to kind of say which came first. It's like a chicken or an egg thing. I don't
Right.
know if I chose what I do because of who I am, or if being a lawyer made me who I am. Like it's hard for me to say. But what I can say is that I've always had a sense, as long as I can remember, of just like, well, that's not fair, and somebody should fix that.
Mm-hmm.
And I still don't think it's fair, by the way. I still think we're at a massive disadvantage, but at least we can make things a little more fair for the people who hire us.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that, because that just speaks to your passions, right? Of why you do. And I mean, how many times do we talk to somebody and they're like, "Well, find your why," right? And it's important, but and yours just comes out as that fairness is the protecting somebody that honestly, without your help, they are going to get screwed. They're going to get trampled on. They're going to get a little tiny settlement. Here, we'll give you 40 grand when in reality they probably deserve 800,000 or 3.5 million. They'll never be able to get it. And I think that's the beauty of what you do, as a personal injury attorney, being able to come along somebody who's been injured, really many times through no fault of their own. Now, sometimes it's their own fault, they do dumb things, but many times something, somebody crossed the line or a truck ran a little red light, whatever it is, you find yourself laying in a hospital bed going, how did I get here? And realizing, and correct me if I'm wrong, the insurance company usually is not your friend.
No, yeah, they're 100% not your friend. I mean, their whole goal is to get out of a case as cheaply as possible because that's the business model. So I don't, it's not. I know a lot of people in my shoes will make kind of broad grandstanding statements about like the good guys and the bad guys and all that kind of stuff. And I don't really look at it that way. I mean, I think people that work in the insurance industry are good people. You know, the
Yeah.
defense lawyers for the most part are good people. Everybody's just kind of doing their job.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is we live in a you know, for better or for worse, mostly still a capitalist society in America.
Yeah.
And you know, capitalism turns on businesses making money, and the insurance industry is a for-profit industry, and so those businesses have a vested financial interest in settling claims for as cheaply as possible, not for the
Right.
right amount.
Right.
And so, you know, adjusters, I see in some of these LinkedIn conversations I see going on that I try not to engage in. You know, the adjusters like, well, we always try and pay what's fair, and you know, I just that's not what I see in
Right.
practice. You know, or I guess maybe a better way of saying that is I think our definitions of fairness are very different.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it's great to be in this particular field of the law because my interests are completely 100% aligned with my clients' interests, which are to get them as much money as I can get them because my fees are tied to how much I get them. And, you know, ultimately, that's the only measure of justice we can get in America for if someone's in an accident is get the money. And
Right.
so, you know, I take that job really seriously. And I think that the insurance companies, you know, like I said, although for the most part it's good people trying to do the right thing, they just come from a different place.
Right.
They're viewing it through a different lens.
Yeah. Very, very much so. We wrote a book for an attorney, years ago, and he's a dear friend of mine, and he was uh, he 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 said something that really struck me. He's like, I have no problem suing a soulless corporation, right? And I thought I never really thought of it in that way, but at the end of the day, it is a corporation that's for profit, and they are trying to keep as much profit as they can. I just had a dear friend of mine whose two children were involved in a head-on collision, drunk driver across the line, right? Teenagers, and of course they're both alive. They're both back on their feet. But she said her daughter, who's in the passenger seat, when she gets into the car now, if something, I mean, she is definitely been impacted by that accident in some form of a traumatic way. I don't know if that's ever going to leave her, right? And she may have to go to counseling a year from now to deal. And what I think what you do is as you're helping a client work with or against the insurance companies to get that sum up, you're looking at all of those things that could come down the road that a mom and dad might not even be thinking about because they're just trying to make, put food on the table and get their kids healthy. We don't think about other things. Is that usually how it
Yeah,
works?
yeah. I mean, that's 100% right. I mean, the way that so I'm a sci-fi nerd. I'm kind of I'm a pretty nerdy guy in when I'm not wearing my lawyer hat.
Yeah.
I guess actually I'm a pretty nerdy guy when I am wearing my lawyer hat. Um, and so the way I kind of look at it is like if you imagine if you had to make first contact with an alien species and you had no common basis for communication, like how do you establish, you know, language? And how do you establish the way to communicate? And then how do you know the rules of communication? How do you know what what their societal perspectives are, and so how they view different moves and posturing and stuff? And so basically, you're playing a game that you don't even know the rules to. And you know, you imagine if you just pulled a board game off the shelf at Target and started playing it, but you didn't even look at the rules. Like you would have
Right.
no idea, you know, what you're doing. And so that's for most people, that's what happens when you're in a car accident. Is you're
Yeah.
all of a sudden you're a player in a game that you didn't ask to play and you don't know the rules of, and you don't have the language to play. And so you know, getting somebody like us involved that you know speaks the language fluently and knows all the rules is really the only way to even remotely make things more fair.
Yeah. And so let's talk about it for just a minute because I mean, my friends, I think they ended up getting a lawyer, but she also said, "Oh, golly, the mailbox is now full with all kinds of attorneys trying to get her." How does somebody go about choosing a good attorney? What kind of counsel would you give somebody?
It's a really hard question, and it's just getting harder and harder. I mean, you know, um, I've now seen, you know, so when I first started doing this and kind of running my own firm and stuff, it was like, you know, Google's king, and how do we market for Google, and how do we make Google find us? And now and that reigned for a long time. And now it's kind of shifted to like, okay, how do we get found in generative AI, and how do we make sure ChatGPT finds our information to share with people? Because everybody, I mean, look, I'm not going to lie, what I do can be very lucrative. Okay,
Oh
so
yeah.
we can make a good living, and so there's a lot of competition for these cases out there, and so you're going to find lawyers competing to get these cases, and pulling out all the stops. And so as a consumer, you're going to be inundated by information, and there isn't really a good way um, to easily tell who's full of shit and who's actually going to help you.
Yeah.
Um, and for the most part, most people that do what I do, I think, are pretty good people and really do put the client first. But there are some firms out there that really are just pushing fast settlements and don't really fight for everything. And so
Yeah.
it's important. And I think kind of the best way is just the old-fashioned analog way, which is to have conversations with people.
Yeah.
So I think that the internet, or even that kind of outward marketing that you're talking about, is really good for collecting a list of people. And then I would counsel anybody who's in that situation to call and talk to a few different people. One of the things that is going to be apparent really quickly is that I'm making up this number, but I feel pretty comfortable about it. That 95% of the lawyers that you will call, you will not actually talk to the lawyer. You will talk to like an intake team, and so you have to. If I was a consumer, I would look at it as like, okay, if this isn't even important enough for the lawyer that's going to be helping me to get on the phone right now, what are the odds that they're going to be available to me later
Yeah.
when things do become more
Well, that's it.
important? And so we run our firm. I run our firm so that everybody who calls in with a potential case talks to a lawyer on that first call.
Wow.
And it's usually me, but sometimes it's one of my associates. And we are making the decisions about okay, is this someone we can help? Is this a good fit? And then once we make that decision, kind of at that early stage, then we're all in. And so I think it's a way for somebody to kind of kick the tires on the
Mm-hmm.
new cars and see like, okay, these people cared about me enough to actually get a lawyer on the phone with me, and that
Yeah.
lawyer is listening to the facts of my case and making determinations. And one of the things we do is, even on cases where we can't help, I'm still always trying to put the people that call in a better position than they were in before they called me. So part of what I'll do when I talk to somebody, and it's a case that we will take, I still will tell them like, okay, here's my plan. Here's what I'm going to do. And theoretically, they could take my plan and try and do it on their own. Like I'm
Right.
sharing the good stuff up front. Um, and so that's, I guess, if I was starting from scratch and didn't know anything, that's the process I would go through. If I was a
Mm-hmm.
consumer, is I would get on the phone and talk to people and see who I felt that connection with, who I felt like was going to do a good job for me, who knew what they were talking about, who I felt comfortable with, and really kind of engage in a more analog process like that.
Yeah. I love that answer because a couple of reasons why is number one, as the consumer, I'm hiring you. You work for me. And so I need to be interviewing you and saying, all right, A, do you have the chops? Are you good enough? Okay. But do you have that bedside manner? Do I connect with you? Because if it's going to be a long drawn out thing, and we're going to be working together for 6 months or 9 months or 2 years, I better like you at some level. And we're good enough, I think, as humans to kind of discern that fairly quickly to go, yeah, I don't like that dude at all. Great. I love that analog method because I think a lot of people don't have, everybody has a realtor, right? They really don't, but not everybody has an attorney. And
Yeah,
when you know
and most, what I one of the analogies I give people a lot of my calls is I equate it to the medical field. So to kind of push back a teeny bit on what you said, I'm less concerned about whether they like me and
Mm-hmm.
more concerned about whether they respect me. Um,
Mm.
so because it's not always about whether you like me. And if I, like if tomorrow I had to go in and have brain surgery, I don't care if I like my brain surgeon. I just care
Mm-hmm.
if I think that they're going to do a good job.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that's kind of the way that I view it. And part of it is, and this is kind of some old school, we were talking some old school Ben Glass going all the way back to
Yeah.
2009, that I'm not going to be the right fit for everybody, and that's okay.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm not
Understood.
trying to pretend like I'm something that I'm not, and I'm not trying to, say what I feel like I need to say to sign up a specific client. I'm just being myself, and if the person feels like the message and my method is a good fit, then it is. So that's kind of what I think the most important thing is: authenticity.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. Um, let's talk real quick as we start winding things up. You started something a while back, and I just want to touch on because I've got a 16-year-old daughter who just today got her driver's permit, and I did some research, and you started something a number of years ago called, if I get it right, Teens Against Distracted Driving. And talk a little bit about that and some of the stats behind it, because I don't think it's just teens that this applies to, because we're all just inundated with this thing and we can't get rid of it even when we're driving. So unpack that just a little bit, and maybe we'll talk a minute or two about distracted driving and what we can do to prevent that a little bit.
Yeah. So that, yeah, it was started a number of years ago, and basically, um, uh, their cell phones were becoming very ubiquitous. Everybody had them. They were starting to get them at younger and younger ages, and it became really clear. Gosh, and like I said, I think this was probably like 13, 14 years ago. I started this. That texting was the primary method of communication that the younger generation was using.
Yeah.
And I remember when I first started doing this, it was crazy to me because like I would rather have a 3-minute phone call
Yes.
than than a text exchange, because I think there's context that's lost. But what has become apparent to me as my kids got older, I remember my now 20-year-old a few years ago said to me, we were talking about like he needed to make an appointment for a haircut or something stupid, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, call them. And he's like, no, calling people is aggressive. And so like, so there's like this mindset shift that like they'll do anything that they can do other than call. And
Wow.
so what the behavior that we were seeing is more and more people that were becoming drivers were texting more and more as their primary means of communication, and that it's just a really dangerous thing to do in the car. And they did studies, and there's data that it's I don't have them memorized anymore,
Yeah.
but something like it increases your chances of being in an accident like 400%. And the amount of time that somebody spends not looking at the road when they're sending a text message, depending on your relative speeds, you're traveling hundreds of feet in that amount of time. And so,
Mm-hmm.
the chances of something going wrong in that amount of time and you not reacting quickly enough are substantial. And so I started to get this message out and go speak to schools, and really to try to see if I knew I wasn't going to solve the problem, but maybe just make a
Right.
dent.
Right.
And it's one of those, you hear it all the time, but like if one person listened, then that's enough.
Yeah.
Um, to your point, the data showed some interesting things, that the second most risky group to engage in texting while driving behavior was parents of teenagers. And that was
Mm-hmm.
because that's how we have to communicate with our teenagers. And
Yeah.
we're also worse at texting than they are.
Yeah.
And so, it's not just about the kids. Yeah, it really is about everybody. And so, anything that we can do to minimize um, the distractions behind the wheel, whether it's, it could be messing with your radio, it could be eating, it could be, being on a phone call, it could be anything, but all those activities increase the danger while you're driving. And so it's just a matter of, like, how can we try and make this as safe as we can? And the answer is to remove as many distractions as possible and just focus on driving. It is hard. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. It's hard, and you're driving and your phone chimes and you're like, oh, I wonder what that is.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of the newer cars and stuff that have integrated CarPlay and Android Auto and stuff are removing some of the physical distractions, because you get like my car will like tell me you got a
Right.
message and read it to me, but still, even engaging in kind of the concentrating on something else does also come with a level of distraction. So ideally, if it was a perfect world, we'd all just turn off our phones when we got
Yep.
in the car. But in the real world, I think that, if you can engage in kind of those automated systems and, put CarPlay on, and maybe have your settings so that your notifications are silenced while you're driving, there's nothing's going to happen in your 15-minute car ride that, can't wait till you get to.
That's yeah. That's what I was going to say. Is rare is the day that a text is urgent. Number one. And I was driving. I was on a trip the other day. I was driving home, and I needed to call somebody, or I don't know what it was. And I'm like, I'm pulling over, and I took the exit, and I just pulled over. I said, okay, now you have my undivided attention. Number one, but number two, I'm a whole lot safer, and so is everybody else on the road. And it was inconvenient, but it probably saved my life and a bunch of others, because it's just like, how often can we just say, you know what? I had a friend of mine back in Little Rock years ago, and anytime he drove, he had a setting on his phone that if I texted him, it texted me right back. It says, "Sorry, I'm driving. I'll get your message when I reach my destination." And I thought, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
I don't know if that
Yeah.
comes built in, or I had no idea.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. There's been solutions to this problem pretty much from the outset of
Yeah.
phones existing. The problem is there's no motivation for the phone companies to
Right.
implement, because
Right.
they want you glued to your device. And
Yes.
so, but it's really easy. Your phone knows when you're moving, and they could just make it so if you're going more than 4 miles an hour, it disables those settings. But there's no will to do that. Again, we're
Right.
a capitalist society.
That's right.
Phone companies make a lot of money, and so we're never going to have a law that mandates that.
Yeah.
So it's the kind of personal responsibility aspect. It's just you got to do it yourself, and make the decision. And even somebody like me that goes around and speaks this message and stuff, like, look, if I'd be lying if I didn't tell you that there's been times when my kids, especially when they were younger, would be like, "Dad, you're looking at your phone," and I'm like, "Oh,
Yeah.
you know,
That's yeah.
yeah, I can't, especially I can't do that, So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it's just it's really hard, but
Yeah.
it's a decision that you have to make. It's kind of the one step at a time thing. I think about this a lot when people I'm pretty into like fitness, and so people will be like, well, how do you get fit? And it's like, well, it's one small decision 10,000 times a day.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with phones. It's just a small decision that you just have to be willing to make each time.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right, man, Jason, this is fun. You've given me and my audience a ton of great just tips and concepts, and a background of somebody who um, really is fighting for justice, who wants to make things fair, and to stand up for the little guy who really can't stand up for themselves. So I appreciate that, because we all need it, and gave you some great tips on how to find a good attorney, putting in the human aspect of it, and then these last minute tips on maybe how to become safer drivers all around. And I appreciate you doing that. How does somebody reach out to you if they want to find out more? If they're in the Pacific Northwest area to actually use your firm, utilize you or something, how would they find you?
Well, you can either search for me, Jason Epstein. Another famous Jason Epstein who was a book editor, but I think I'm number two on the list.
Okay,
And or Premier Law Group is the name of the firm. And certainly either one of those search terms will get you into my stuff. And
awesome.
happy to help, happy to talk. And one of the things we didn't mention is like I said, if you call my office, even if I know I'm not going to be able to help you, I talk to you for 20, 30 minutes and try and put you in a better spot. Give
That's
me stuff
amazing.
we don't do.
Yeah, that's quite amazing in and of itself. Speaks to a lot to your character integrity. So thank you for doing that. Thanks for being on my guest, and for bringing the passion that you do to what you do, to serving really the underdog, people like me who find themselves in a tough spot. You're there to help. So Jason, thanks for what you do, for being my guest on Expert Speak.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.